Hello, this is Simon Hobbs. Simon, your beloved mumbling Aussie friend. Today I'm going to talk about how you can put PHPStan in your project. So PHPStan just statically analyzes your code. It's great for Drupal. It picks up deprecations, picks up when you haven't typed things properly, and variable types. Just it just takes away some of the risk and uncertainty with your code. So let's look at setting it up and just talk about the practices that you can follow. I'm just going to do everything by example. In this discussion, what I'm going to do is I've got some notes here just on the screen. So I'm going to use Composer to add PHPStan to my project as a required dev requirement. I've got a command here for running PHPStan. So once you've installed it, you run it out of your vendor directory. I'm going to look at how you can do what's called generating a baseline. So you can have existing problems that you haven't solved yet. You can make a record of those problems without just ignoring them in the code. And then you can slowly improve that code over time. And just a shout out to Michael Strellan, Lee Rollins, and Adam Bramley, just for some help in Slack when I was first getting my head around this. So yeah, thanks guys. So look, let's go straight into running the commands. So I've got a development environment already running here. It happens to be DDev at this stage. And so pretty much if I'm using Lando or DDev, I'm going to run Composer commands and things like that. I'm going to try and run as much as possible in the containers. So the command here it's essentially I'm doing a Composer require, but you'll see that I've got DDev at the front of the command, which means that it's going to take care of running it inside the container. Consistency. It's good. And so I'm requiring PHPStan, extension installer, Matt Glemans, obviously the awesome guy who's done the extension for Drupal, and deprecation rules. So let's do it. So the next thing that I want to do is I need to configure PHPStan within my code base. The code base I've got is just the free source website. At the moment it's very new. It's very simple. There's really not a lot of code to actually review. It makes for a good example. Let's have a look at this example PHPStan neon file. So let's start up the top here. We're going to start with our parameters and our code coverage. So phpstan.neon is the configuration file. You can have other files and they can be joined together, but you'll see that our example is so simple that we only need one file. Okay, so there's some important decisions here. When you're starting on a project, especially a complex project, you're probably going to want to start level 1 on your PHPStan. So that's the easiest level. The lowest number of things will be raised from that level. And in my case, I want to cover my custom modules and my custom theme. You can point these paths anywhere you want if you want to do your settings.php file. So that's going to be the initial configuration I'm going to use, and so I'm just going to demonstrate running this. So I've got a command here, having installed. Okay, so we've got no errors. So at level 1 of PHPStan, we've got no errors in our site. If you've got a large code base, this is not likely to happen. Okay, now we're going to bump things up a little bit, and I think what we'll do is we'll bump this up to level. I know all the levels up to level 5 are fine, so we're going to go straight to level 6. Okay, found 13 errors, and you can tell that that I didn't name this module because it doesn't have a stupid name. So free source generic module. So what are our 3 problems here? What problems is PHPStan saying that we have with our code? A lot of the problems are going to be around clean types and consistent typing of variables. So So the first thing we're doing is we're just going to type hint all of our parameters. And then this is another problem that will occur, is that we want to say what type our function will return, and that's array. And one of the problems that PHPStan picks up is that if there's something that can be iterated, like this existing array, that PHPStan can't detect what types of things are in that array. It might be an array of strings, an array of objects, and so it can't warn us if we're misusing it. So it really wants us to document that parameter and use some sort of crazy syntax, which I can't remember off my head, where it's going to be in an array of arrays that's going to be passed into that, and then PHPStan can then cover it properly. Now, we just don't do that in Drupal core. So this is where we introduce the first of our settings. So this check missing iterable value type false. So there's a few things like that, as you'll find. I'm not going to cover everything in this video, but you'll find that Drupal has its own idiosyncrasies. So you're going to be doing a few things like this as you go along. Okay, so we chuck that parameter in. Check missing iterable value type false. We don't want to check that. Now let's rerun our check, and we'll see if we've gotten rid of all of the errors in that file. All right, fstheme.theme. Found 9 errors. So now we're just going to systematically work through the code. It's going to be pretty quick to go through this code. fstheme.theme. It is all pretty much hook theme suggestions hook alter. So we're telling Drupal about templates. In this case, I'm telling Drupal about my bear template so that I don't get extra markup for my light tailwind theme. And I'm also going to declare that this function is not going to return anything. And pretty much I just go through each of the functions and do that. As you can see, it's a very small code base that we've done. We're finished. We're pretty much done now. So now if we run this again, we should have no problems. Okay, so one of the really cool things about PHPStan is it can pick up deprecation errors, and that's one of the things you really don't want to leave in your code. If I'm calling a function or a method or something like that that's going to be removed in the next version of Drupal, especially as I go into projects and come out of projects, I'm leaving a problem for someone else that they're going to have to fix in 6 months, a year maybe. Let's look at what that looks like. So if we go to say, a random module, I'm just looking for some code that's deprecated. So I'm not going to call that code. I'm not going to use it properly. So we've got this function called honeypot get protected forms, and this is deprecated. So what I'm going to do is add this code into my theme somewhere. Doesn't really matter where. And rerun. So now we've got this call to a deprecated function, and let's imagine that we're not able to fix this yet. So we haven't found a better way to do this, or we've only just noticed it, and there's a bunch of code to refactor. So we want to put this off. So this is where this generate baseline idea switch comes in. So if I add generate baseline, it's going to create for me this baseline file. And if I look in my code base down the bottom, where my PHPStan is, there's my baseline. Okay, so if I just grab that and copy that and delete this file, I don't need the separate file. And add this to the bottom. So what this will now do is it's going to detect that I know about the error, and it's going to let me pass. Okay. And so now I've got no errors. So the great thing about that is I can put that off to another day. Now, what happens if someone does this again? So they've added this twice. So let's say if I go and grab this function and go over to close that file, go over to my free source generic module, and I chuck that function in there. So now I'm calling this deprecated function twice. So now we're calling this function twice, and I just want to track it in one place. For example, I've got this, I'm already ignoring this error. I've put up here like a link to read more about the problem. There might be a patch that we want to use, or there might be some article about it to resolve it at some point. And I don't really want to repeat it every time it appears in a different file. And for some issues, it can happen quite a lot. On one project, I have 30 or 40 of the same error. So first thing is, let's just make that path generic. Let's say we don't really care which file it gets matched in, and then we have quite a lot of stuff. So we just read through this, and in this case, that should pick up in any file because it'll always be the same error. So let's give that a go and try running that. So now you can see that it says that it's picked up this error, and it was expected to pick it up once, but it actually picked it up twice. So so we've added this new piece of code. Look, we didn't want to, but we had to. And what it's really just asking us to do is just to bump that count up. So if the code gets added, the PHPStan won't be happy. However, in code review, you'll see it's been added. You'll bump it up, and you'll have that kind of record that you've done that. It's not like you're not tracking the addition of these extra problems. So if we then run that code, we should get an OK. So the count of it is matching. We're going to leave that in there for the moment, and we're going to look at a different problem by bumping up to level 9. So here's an example of where, if we go and have a look at our call to this function, to this method on the cross-site scripting class. So this happens. So this type of thing happens a lot in Drupal core. So there's nothing wrong with doing this. That XSS filter is expecting the string, but PHPStan, what I'm pretty sure in this situation, it can't determine if it's going to get a string back from that get method on the site config class, on the site config service. So in these situations, you start to then decide how you're going to handle that. Are you going to just track? Are you just going to ignore it in line because you can do that, or are you going to add an ignore later? Now, I've never gone past level 7, so I'll just bump that back down to level 7, and then I'm going to talk about a different problem. So we should be. So we're at the moment we're okay. So what I want to do is talk about a really common problem that you can get, and so we can see it in this line here. So this is the ignore file. This is the baseline file for Drupal core. So a couple of thousand lines, a lot of things that they're ignoring that will get picked up over time. And the one we're interested in is here, access to undefined property on the date time item of date. And so what's happening is that property it's a magic getter. So there's no method to get the date from that field, to get a date object from that field. So you just basically access a property called date. That doesn't exist, and therefore it gets magically set within that class. So I want to talk about the different approaches or the ways to think about this problem. So this discussion that's happening on PHPStan, on the Drupal PHPStan plugin by Matt Gleman, is very similar. So this person, Alberto, is basically saying he's got an entity, he's accessing the original property. PHPStan doesn't like it, and he wants to talk about how to resolve this. So one way to resolve it is to use this PHPStan ignore next line, and I don't really like using this method because what I've seen in code bases is tends to just sort of get added, and there's not really it's sort of not centralized the way it is when you have the baseline file. In the baseline file, you can put a comment to where you're resolving it. You can have a count of them all. Whereas if you're just ignoring the next line all through your code base, things can slip through in that scenario. So what DPI is suggesting here is that, hey, why don't you run a patch? So an example of this is the issue that I created in response to Michael Strellin's discussion, where I've created a patch. I've created an issue where I've basically said, hey, PHPStan doesn't like this, and my proposed resolution is to add this this annotation to the class that basically says that property is a Drupal date time, and then effectively PHPStan will monitor your use of that and make sure that you're using it as a date. That's fine. So then that can get fixed, and then I can use a patch, and then PHPStan won't complain. That works very well as well. And then there's another solution that's worth exploring, is that you can create these stub files, and what the stub files do is they sort of tell PHPStan on the behalf of a code that you don't control what's going on in that code. So here we look at this stub file. Namespace is Drupal core entity, interface is entity interface, and you might say, okay, it's got a property original that is of this type of object, and then you would keep that stub file within your own code base. So that's also a solution that works. Okay, so I think with that's pretty much the end of the video. My foot's going to sleep, and I'll see you very soon. Thank you.